And I got a question. What is your first feelings when you start to be a monk Zen? What was the first feelings when you start to be a monk Zen, to be a monk?
So what was his first experience when he became a monk, or why he decided to become a monk?
What was the feelings when he was young, when he started to be?
저는 승려가 되고 싶지 않았습니다.
I never wanted to be a monk.
근데 제가 고등학교 1학년 때 학교 옆에 절이 하나 있었습니다.
When I was a freshman in high school, there was a temple right next to my high school.
1300년 전에 그곳에서 한국 제일로 유명한 원효대사라는 분이 머무셨던 곳이기도 합니다.
So it was a temple in which Venerable Wonhyo, which is one of the most famous Buddhist monk in Korean history, about 1300 years ago, he's the one who actually resided there.
그 절에 학교 옆에 있으니까 자주 가게 되고 그 절에 주지 스님을 만나서 반강제로 되다시피 이렇게 승려가 됐어요.
So I frequented that temple just because it was located right next to high school. I happened to meet with the abbot of that temple and almost voluntold to become a monk.
저는 종교를 별로 좋아하지 않았습니다.
Because I did not like religion.
그때까지 제가 한 세 종류의 종교를 접해봤습니다.
Because until then, in high school and freshman, I encountered 3 different religions.
네, 초등학교 들어가기 전에는 한국의 전통 신앙, 무속 이것을 자주 접했고요.
Before I actually started school, elementary school, I encountered a lot of shamanism, which is the indigenous kind of faith tradition of Korea.
점을 친다든지 구슬을 한다든지 이런 것을 늘 보고 있었습니다.
So I always frequently encounters like fortune telling or shamanistic rituals.
네, 그런데 그들이 뭔가를 알아맞추는 게 굉장히 궁금해서 물었는데 가르쳐주지 않았습니다.
So I was very curious how they could tell the future. So I asked, but they would not reveal their secrets.
그리고 초등학교 다니다가 동네 교회가 생겨서 다니게 됐습니다.
So during elementary school, somebody actually built a church in the village, so I started going to church.
노래 찬송가도 배우고 연극도 하고 정말 재밌었습니다.
So it was a lot of fun because we sang hymns and we did plays.
그랬는데 그 목사님이 자꾸 예수님은 처녀의 몸으로 아기를 낳았다, 동정녀 마리아가 낳았다는 것을 늘 강조했습니다.
And the minister actually tended to repeatedly emphasize the fact that Jesus was born of a virgin birth.
제가 잘은 모르지만 진짜 그럴 수가 있나 해서 2번인가 물었습니다.
So I was curious about that because that didn't make sense to me. So I asked him twice if that was really true.
그랬더니 그 목사님이 불신자는 지옥 간다고 얘기해요.
And he actually then scolded me by saying that if I don't, non-believers will go to hell.
그때 어렸지만은 조금 이건 아니다 싶었습니다.
So I was young, but I felt that it was unfair.
아니 궁금해서 물었는데 왜 궁금한 것이 죄가 되나 이런 생각이
Because I
들었어요.
was just merely curious, and I was thinking, why should curiosity become a sin?
그래서 이제 교회 다니다가 이제 도시에 있는 중학교로 갔습니다.
So-
그만두고 교회를 그만두고.
So I stopped going to church. Then I went on to a junior high, moved away.
근데 친구가 절에 가자고 해서 따라갔습니다.
So in junior high, a friend of mine had said, "Hey, let's go to Buddhist temple." So I followed him.
또 그날 스님이 부처님은 어머니가 아기를 낳자마자 딱 서서 7발자국을 걸었다 이렇게 얘기했습니다.
And that monk that I saw that first time I went to the temple, he taught that Buddha was born, and that he stood up as soon as he was born and walked 7 steps in all 4 cardinal directions.
그리고 하늘 위 하늘 아래 나홀로 가장 존귀하다고 말했다고 합니다.
And he proclaimed as a newborn, standing up, saying, "I am the most precious in heaven and earth."
그러니까 벌써 부처가 될 몸으로 태어났다는 얘기입니다.
So basically, that says that he was Buddha as soon as he was born.
저는 그때 그 얘기를 듣고 2가지 의문이 생겼습니다.
So I had 2 questions when I heard that story.
첫째는 사람이 태어나는데 정말 설 수 있나 이게 궁금했고요.
So I was curious whether a newborn can really stand.
두 번째는 누구나 다 부처가 될 수 있다고 그 스님이 말했는데 나는 태어날 때 서지를 못했으니까 그럼 부처가 안 되나 이런 생각이 들었어요.
And I also was curious about the contradiction of the teaching because the monk said that everybody had the past potential to be a Buddha, could be a Buddha. Then I never stood up when I was born, so can I really be the Buddha?
그래서 제가 그 의문을 물었습니다.
So I asked those questions,
그런 대답을 제대로 못했습니다.
and he wasn't really able to answer.
그러나 지옥 간다 소리는 안 했습니다.
At least he didn't tell me I would go to hell.
그래서 제가 경험할 수 있는 종교는 그게 전부였는데 종교를 그래서 제가 좋아하지 않았습니다.
So that was the extent of my religious encounters, experiences. So I didn't really like religions.
그리고 저는 과학자가 되는 것을 꿈으로 가졌습니다.
My dream was actually to become a scientist.
특히 저는 수학, 물리학, 천문학을 좋아했습니다.
I especially liked astronomy, math, and physics.
근데 그 스님이 나보고 너는 스님이 될 팔자다, 스님이 되려고 태어났다 이렇게 얘기해서 굉장히 거부 반응이 많았습니다.
So when that abbot monk told me that I was fated, destined to be a Buddhist monk, I resisted.
계속 그렇게 이제 저를 보면 스님이 돼야 된다고 얘기하니까 조금 거부 반응이 있었습니다.
Because he kept telling me the same thing, that I was fated to be a Buddhist monk every time he saw me.
근데 어느 날 이제 제가 아직도 학교 다닐 때니까 시험을 잘 치고 싶어서 절에 가서 시험 좀 잘 치게 해주세요 이렇게 기도를 하고 나오는데 그 스님이 불렀습니다.
So I went to the temple one day because it was right before a big test. So I was praying to the Buddha to give me good grades for the big test, and I was leaving the temple. He called me over,
또 그 얘기할 것 같았어요.
and I was dreading the fact because I thought he was gonna tell me again.
그래서 제가 미리 스님 저 오늘은 바쁩니다 이렇게 말했습니다.
So I struck first and said, dear abbot monk, I'm really busy today.
그래? 이러시더니
He goes, yeah.
너 어디서 왔니? 이래요.
And he goes, where'd you come from?
학교에서 왔습니다.
I said, from school.
학교에서 오기 전에는
Before school?
집에서 왔습니다.
From home.
그 전에는
Before then?
이렇게 자꾸 물었어요.
So he kept asking that question.
약간 좀 귀찮았고 이상하게들 보였습니다.
It was a little weird, right? A little frustrating line of questioning.
그러다 보니까 어머니 뱃속에서 태어났죠까지 갔습니다.
So basically we ended up saying that I came from my mom.
그 뱃속에서 태어나기 전에는
And he goes, well, before then, where did you come from?
모르겠습니다. 이랬어.
I said, I have no idea.
그럼 너 어디 갈 거니?
And he goes, well, where are you going now?
도서관에 갈 겁니다.
I said, I'm going to go to the library.
다음에는
And afterwards,
집이에요.
I'm going to go home.
그 다음에는
And then
내일 아침 학교 가야죠.
tomorrow morning I have to go back to school.
이렇게 또 계속 물었어요.
So he kept going on that line of question.
그러다 이제 죽죠 뭐 이랬어요.
Then ultimately we ended up, so I guess I'll end up dying.
죽은 뒤에는
How about after death?
모르겠습니다.
I said, I don't know.
그랬더니 그 스님이 큰 소리로 저를 야단을 쳤습니다.
So at that time, he really scolded me suddenly in a loud voice.
어디서 와서 어디로 가는지도 모르는 놈이 바쁘기는 왜 바빠 했습니다.
He said, how can you say you're busy when you have no idea where you came from, have no idea where you're going?
그때 정신이 번쩍 들었어요.
That kind of struck me.
내가 왜 바쁘지?
He goes, why am I busy?
난 내일 시험이 있었기 때문에 그 생각에 제가 바쁘다 하는 생각을 하고 있었습니다.
Because I told myself I was busy because there was a test tomorrow morning.
근데 너 어디서 왔니? 하니까 모르겠다. 너 어디 가니? 하니까 모르겠다. 근데 내가 바쁘다. 모순이잖아요.
So basically, I actually recognized that the contradiction in my attitude. I had no idea where it came from, have no idea where I was going. Nevertheless, I was still busy.
그 스님이 던진 낚시 바늘에 결국은 걸린 겁니다.
Basically, he hooked me with that contradiction.
그거 아는 사람이 있습니까? 하니까 있지.
So I asked him, does anybody know the answer to that question? He goes, yes.
그래서 어떻게 하면 압니까?
So how can I find out?
여기 들어와야 된다.
Then you have to come into the temple.
네, 이렇게 해서 사실은 굉장히 좀 거부를 하다가 들어오게 됐어요.
So that's how I really became a Buddhist monk after initial resistance.
근데 저희 어머님이 이제 찾아와서 울고불고 난리가 났습니다.
And then once I actually got ordained or entered into the temple, my mom came to the temple crying.
고등학교라도 졸업하는 애야 데려가지 어떻게 다니는 애를 데려가느냐.
Because she protested against the Abbot monk, saying, "Why don't you at least let him graduate high school before you take him?"
그러니까 스님이 어머니께 이 아이가 앞으로 어떻게 되는지 아느냐고 물었습니다.
So then the Abbot monk asked the mom, as my mom say, "Do you know what's going to happen to this kid, to this child?"
모르겠다고 했습니다.
And she said, "I have no idea."
나는 한다 했습니다.
And the abbot said, "I know."
아는 사람이 돌봐야 되겠어요? 모르는 사람이 돌봐야 되겠어요?
And he asked my mom this question: Is it better for somebody who knows who this kid is going to be to take care of him, or should it be somebody who doesn't know what this kid is going to be?
아는 사람이 지도해야 합니다.
And my mom had to admit that somebody who knows what this kid's going to be should take care of him.
근데 우리 어머니는 그래도 궁금했나 봐요.
But I think my mom was still curious
이 아이가 어떻게 됩니까? 했어요.
because she asked, like, "So what's going to happen to this kid?"
이 아이는 단명한다고 스님 말했어요.
And the abbot told her, "This kid is going to die early, die young."
그 우리 어머니가 너무 놀랐어요.
And that shocked my mom.
그러니까 스님 아들 하세요 하고 가버렸어요.
And so my mom said, "Okay, then you take him."
이렇게 해서 집안 문제도 쉽게 끝이 났습니다.
So, in that way, there was an easy separation for me from my family.
이렇게 얘기가 길었습니다만 이렇게 해서 원하지 않았는데 어쩌다 보면 이렇게 돼버렸어요.
So basically, going back to your question, sorry for the long response, is that I became a monk despite myself.
지금 올해가 55년째 나는데요.
So it's been 55 years since I became a monk.
내가 선택한 것은 아니지만은 이것도 지나 보니까 괜찮다는 말씀을 드리고 있습니다.
So it wasn't really my intentional choice to become a monk, but now that 55 years has passed, looking back on it, it wasn't a bad choice.
근데 여러분들은 대부분 다 자기가 좋은 방향으로 결정을 합니다.
We all tend to want to make choices that we think is good for us.
그래 놓고도 힘들어합니다.
Then we suffer.
그래서 저는 가끔 이렇게 조언을 합니다.
So this is how I advise people often.
나는 내가 원하지 않는 길을 가도 살만한데 네가 선택해놓고 왜 네가 힘들어하느냐.
So I'm okay walking this path that I didn't really intentionally choose for myself. But what about you? How come you chose your path? You made your decisions. Then why do you suffer?